this is Mr. Lloyd, and this video is about calculator skills on your exams. I want you to make sure that you have all the calculator skills necessary to get the correct answer. I don't want you doing the right calculation but getting the wrong answer because you pressed the wrong order of buttons on your calculator. So I'm going to start off with the calculator. I have a Casio FX83 GT Plus. It's quite a common kind of calculator that you need for exams, so that's what I'm going to do. There's obviously different models, so you need to make sure you know how your calculator works properly. I don't think any models do anything particularly differently much. They might have slightly different positions for the buttons, but you need to test it with your calculator. And at the bottom of this video there are some exercises where you have to do calculations on your calculator and get the correct answer that I've given. So I've given you the answers. The idea is you work out which buttons to press to get to those answers. So the first few buttons I'm going to go through is the SD button. So if you want to convert a fraction to a decimal, because you need to give the answer to a certain number of significant figures, then you use the SD button. So I've done 2 divided by 3 makes 2/3. If I press the SD button, I will get a fraction. I get 0.6 recurring, which has so the 6 has a dot over it, which means that 6 goes on forever. There's lots of 6s. It goes 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, forever and ever and ever. Okay? If I press it again, I get all the digits that the calculator screen can handle, and then it rounds up to 7 on the last one. So that's a good trick to use for making sure you get decimals. Just a little note on the recurring button. If I do 1 divided by 7, it's a seventh. If I do SD, there's 2 dots, so it goes 0.142857 with a dot on the 1 and a dot on the 7, which means it is 0.142857, 142.857, 142.857, etc. Right, so that's the SD button. The next button is a handy little trick. It's the reciprocal button, or the x to the minus 1 button. So what that means is if you take a number like 60 and then you press the button and press equals, you get the answer 1 over 60. So you take a number and you do 1 divided by that number. And obviously if you want to see what that number is as a decimal, you press the SD button. Now this is a good trick to use in physics, because there is an equation in physics which is frequency of a wave is equal to 1 divided by the period of a wave. So the frequency is the number of waves per second, and the period is the number of seconds that it takes to make a wave. So if you ever get that calculation, then you'll be able to do a quick calculation. Okay, so the next one is really important. It's standard form. Now, standard form is very important. It's very important to be able to write in standard form and interpret in standard form. Right, so first we're going to write in standard form. Now, if you want to know more about standard form, I have a video on standard form and some exercises on it. So, what I've seen some people do when doing calculations with standard form, they say, for example, we have the calculation 2 times 10 to the 3 times 3 times 10 to the 4. What they do is they write 2 times 10 to the power 3 times 3 times 10 to the power 4. Now if I press equals on that, it gets you an error. And the reason is that what the calculator is doing, if I put this in again, 2 times 10 to the power 3 times 3 times 10 to the power 4. What's happened is this calculation here is all for the power of 2 times 10 to the power of whatever it is. Now, you've not actually done the calculation you need. Now the way we get around this is there is an actual standard form button. So on this calculator, the FX83 GT Plus, it says times 10 to the x, but in some other models it might say EXP. So if you try that again, 2 times 10 to the 3 times 3 times 10 to the 4 equals, should be 6 times 10 to the 7. Well, there you go, 6, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it should be 6 times 10 to the 7. Which brings me on to expressing things in standard form. So there's a couple of things to do to make sure you get a proper number in standard form, because trying to count all the digits and then convert to standard form is a bit of a pain. So for example, you can set up your calculator to always give you an answer in standard form. So I press Shift and then the mode button which says setup, and then I press 7 for psi, and then what this is saying is it wants you to put it in standard form. How many significant figures do you want it to? So if you put 0, it just automatically does one digit before the decimal place and then all the rest afterwards. So it's the standard form you want. So if we were to do this calculation again, now that we have put it in standard form, we get the answer 6.00 times 10 to the power 7. So that is the standard form we want. Okay, so but what if, for example, you want to change the number in standard form? So what if, for example, something went wrong, you want to change the number of digits? Well, you press this button, the ENG button. So what the ENG button does is it reduces, normally by 3, the power of 10. Okay, and if you want to increase it, you press Shift and then ENG, which is that left pointing arrow, and that increases the powers of 10. So that is quite a useful button to use. So that's standard form. So that's writing in standard form and getting an answer in standard form. And now the last thing I want you to do is use the memory. Now the memory is very important, and the reason is if you have a really long calculation, so in chemistry, for example, it might be a calculation where you've got the mass of a reactant in a reaction, and you need to work out the mass of a product. You have to divide by the relative mass, and then work out the ratios, and then times the moles by the relative mass of the product. There's lots of numbers in there, and if the numbers have lots of decimal places, and you round them up before you round up the answer to the appropriate number of significant figures, you might get the answer wrong because you've multiplied two slightly different answers together, and then you've got an answer that's slightly off the number of significant figures. Now, questions like that normally have a range, but it is a very small range, and if you're not careful, you're not going to get the correct answer. You're going to be outside of that range. So what if you get a load of numbers that have tons of decimal places, okay? And obviously the exam, you're very stretched for time. You don't want to be spending ages typing in loads of these numbers. So for example, we could do 2/3. We could do 2/3, for example. So if I was to do 2 divided by 3, it's 2/3. That's 0.6 recurring, or 0.66666666666666666. Well, 6.6 times 10 to the minus 1. So if I press ENG, I get times 10 to the minus 3. If I press the left arrow, I then get it times 10 to the power 0. Times 10 to the power 0 is the number that you normally write it as. Okay. So, for example, say I wanted to times that number by 3 again. Okay. So if I was to round this number up, and this is a really simple version, say if I rounded up to 0.7 and I times that number by 3, I now get 2.1. Well, I didn't start with 2.1, I started with 2. Okay, so that might put me outside of the range. So what I could do is 2 divided by 3 equals that. SD that. So what I do is, if I stick this number in the memory, so what I need to look at is this button here, the one with an RCL on the button and an STO at the top. So to put it in the memory, I press Shift because I want to press STO, which is store. So Shift STO. So I'm going to store something, and then I pick one of these 6 buttons. They've got red letters on them. I don't need to press the alpha button yet, I'll just say A because everything's empty. So that answer is going to go into A. So if I wanted to get that number again, I do recall A 2/3 times that by 3 equals 2. So I haven't lost any of the decimal places. Okay. Say I wanted to multiply two numbers together, two numbers with lots of decimal places. So let's try 2/3 and a 7th. So 2 divided by 3. So I'm going to store that in memory A. And then I say 1 divided by 7 is that. I'm going to store that in memory B. Right, so I can't do recall for more than one. So what I could do is I press the alpha button. So it's red, it's colour coded with the letters. So alpha, so I will pick A times alpha B. And equals 2/21, which is 0.095238 recurring. Okay, so that's the end on the calculator video. There are some exercises for you to use, and I've given the answers, but the idea is you get the answer by going through your calculator functions, by practicing what you've seen in this video, or by using your calculator if it's different and working out your functions for it. Okay, if you have a different calculator, then you can Google things to work out what to do, such as how do I get standard form on it, or how do I store it in the memory. Okay, good luck with your calculator work, and see you soon.